What a vile, lying bitch. It made him wonder what she wore when she went out for the evening. He hurried back to the bedroom and began sorting through his wife's underwear. It was difficult for him to remember everything about Melanie, and he had almost given up. But a sudden suspicion gripped him, and he returned to check one more item: a garter belt. He was absent. Angrily, he looked for a suitable bra and panties, but they were gone too. Went out for dinner with some girlfriends, huh? He put everything back and returned to the kitchen table to think, so you love sabotage and deception? Well, two can play this game. When Melanie returned home after midnight, he was still seething, but pretended to be asleep when she tiptoed into the bedroom. When he heard the shower turn on, he did everything he could not to stand up and attack her. Who would have thought that going to lectures would be such a sweaty job? He thought bitterly. The next morning, Adam got up very early and left for work before Melanie even woke up. Next to the coffee pot, he left a note for his wife. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's lecture. I had to leave early for a meeting at work, and I might be late today, so don't wait for me. For Adam, it was indeed a busy day, but his meetings were not with clients or suppliers. During lunch, he did a little shopping and then headed home with some of his purchases to do a few preparations. After that, he went to 2 more meetings, which took up the entire afternoon. When he finished, he went to dinner and a movie to kill time. Melanie was already asleep when he climbed into bed, trying not to wake her. However, when she woke up the next morning, she found her husband waiting for her. I thought you had left for work a long time ago, honey, she said, gratefully accepting the cup of coffee he handed her. I wanted to make sure to see you this morning because I have a flight to Detroit at noon. I'll be out for a few days generating leads. This is something new. You don't have to travel so often, so when do you think you'll be back? Not until Friday evening, and if everything goes well, I can only leave there on Saturday morning. Can you cope here while I'm gone? She gave him a bright smile. Do not worry about me. I'm sure I can find something to do while you're gone. Fine. Just remember to stay away from our good friend while I'm gone. Her face darkened. It's not funny, Adam. Sorry. You're right. It's not funny. He then waved his hand at her, picked up his suitcase, and headed towards the car. He frowned as he pulled out of the driveway. She didn't even notice that I didn't say, I love you. I bet she's already making plans to meet her lover again. Now I just need a little distraction to make sure her meeting takes place here at home. Instead of going to the airport, Adam left his office at lunchtime and went to the university. Parking off campus, he walked briskly toward the Graduate School of Business. He had shed his usual sports jacket and slacks and was now wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. He had a cheap backpack slung over his shoulder. Without raising his head, he headed to the reading room of the School of Business library. The few students there did not pay any attention to him as he casually walked behind the rack of periodicals. Once he was out of sight, he pulled out a string of the largest firecrackers he could buy, lit the extra-long fuse attached to them, and tossed them into a metal container for disposal. He then casually walked to the nearest door, propped it up with his backpack, and walked out. Once outside, he took out the phone he had purchased the day before and called campus security. Come quickly. They're shooting at the business school, he shouted excitedly when his call was answered. I think there may be several of them. They're still shooting. He then turned the receiver towards the library, and within seconds, a series of fireworks began. He cut the connection and hurried across campus to his car as sirens blared and people began running in all directions. He was parked in his neighborhood and watching from his spot when, an hour later, he saw his wife's car pull into his driveway. Then a second car pulled up behind her, and a male figure appeared. In times of danger, there is no place like home, Adam muttered, grinning sadly. He then got into his car and drove to the motel where he had booked a room. Late that evening, he drove around his neighborhood one more time to make sure the second car was still in his driveway. Then he returned to his room and tried to get some sleep. When the adulterous couple left the house the next morning, they were surprised to find Adam leaning against the stranger's car door. God, Carl, this is my husband. Melanie gasped when she recognized him. I thought you were in Detroit, she stammered, and then caught herself thinking, realizing how it sounded. Darling, everything is not as it seems. Carl just came by to... Just stop, Melanie. Every time you open your mouth, you are only lying. I don't want to hear it anymore. He bared his teeth and gestured at the two of them. That's exactly what it sounds like. I know you both spent the night here, and I have a record of everything you said and did together. So stop talking and listen. He grabbed the manila envelope tucked under his arm and handed it to her. I am filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Inside, you will find the name and number of my lawyer. Find yourself a lawyer and ask him to contact mine. But don't try to contact me, because after what you did, I don't intend to see or talk to you anymore. No, honey, don't say that. It was just a one-time mistake. We can work things out, I promise. I said, stop lying, he growled. This is not a one-time incident. You have been having fun with him for several weeks, and it definitely wasn't a mistake. You planned everything in advance. I know you sent that letter as a distraction so you could spend spring break together wherever you went. And by the way, your mom wants to know why you haven't visited her lately. I guess you were so wrapped up in that piece of crap, he gestured at the Sultan man, that you didn't even go see her. He paused to turn his attention to Melanie's lover. Oh yes, that reminds me. Adam quickly took out his cell phone and took several pictures of the amazed man. When he realized what was happening, the man growled, clenched his fists, and took a threatening step towards Adam. Adam immediately reached into his jacket pocket and extended his hand far enough to show the handle of the gun. Oh, he said calmly. I wouldn't do this if I were you. I have no intention of ruining my life by killing you, but I will be glad if you give me a chance to shoot you in self-defense. Stop! The man raised his hands up and took a step back. Adam turned to Melanie with a grin. Looks like your boyfriend is a lover, not a fighter. Then his voice became cold and hard. Take everything you need from the house and then get out, Mel. Don't be here when I get back. I wasn't kidding when I said I never wanted to see you again. Adam, please, she wailed. I never wanted it to be this way. He ignored her and walked to his car when she sat down on the driveway and began sobbing into her hands. On the way to his office, Adam stopped at a dumpster and threw away his phone along with the toy gun he was keeping in his pocket. I'm very glad that these things look so realistic, he grinned mercilessly. Returning to his desk, Adam used his cell phone to send an email containing one of the photos he had taken. To his surprise, he received a call back a few minutes later. This is Dr. Mayfair. Did you just email me a photo? Dr. Mayfair, forgive me for intruding on you again, but do you happen to recognize the man in the photograph? I think his name is Carl. Is the woman standing next to him your wife? I'm afraid of my ex-wife. Very beautiful woman. I think she was in one of my classes last year. As for the man next to her, I actually recognize him. His name is Carl Mannheim. It so happened that he is one of my dissertation students. Carl Mannheim. Good to hear, Doctor. I'm afraid I have a score to settle with your Mr. Mannheim. So he was the serpent who stained your Garden of Eden? Yes, in a way. But I'm afraid that my Eve was far from innocent. It's clear. Very interesting. Well, I'm glad I was able to help you, although I'm sorry the result wasn't what you wanted. Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate your time and your help, despite how things turned out. Well, good luck to you, my boy, and don't lose hope. Everything always works out for the better. Take it from someone who has been there and made it to the other side. 2 months later, I sat opposite my lawyer and was annoyed. Have you heard anything from Melanie's lawyer yet? How are things going with the divorce? Yes. Yesterday I spoke with Hannah Montrose, and today she sent a counteroffer to Melanie. The good news is that Melanie has decided not to fight the divorce anymore. Apparently, after Hannah heard the recordings you made in your home, she convinced your wife not to risk having them played in court. But the bad news is that now that Melanie has accepted that the marriage is over, she seems intent on getting as much out of you financially as possible. Crap. She lies and deceives me. And when she gets caught, she expects me to pay her for the privilege. It's just not fair. What does my cheating wife want? I usually expect to see a request for the division of all your property. But in this case, there is nothing to divide. You rent, you don't have a pension plan, and you have very little savings. The only asset you have is a share in your business, which is operating at a loss. Apparently, she expects him to fail, so she's only asking the court for alimony. I certainly appreciate her vote of confidence in me. Adam snapped sarcastically. So how much alimony does she want? Much more than we offered. The lawyer handed the sheet to his client. Adam looked at him and gasped. This is ridiculous. She knows I can't afford it. If I have to shell out that much money every month, I'm essentially liquidating my business to pay her. What can I say? Melanie refuses to negotiate, so Hannah will propose just that to Judge Abernathy. Well, I'm not going to give up and give Melanie that much money without a fight. We'll have to take our chances in court. Okay, Adam, I understand what you're getting at, but remember, Judge Abernathy has absolute power. You are left with whatever he decides. Almost exactly a month later, Adam sat in the courtroom and waited anxiously. After both lawyers presented their arguments, Judge Abernathy adjourned. How do you think things are going? Adam asked his lawyer in a whisper. I have no idea. It could go either way, or the judge could decide on some kind of compromise. They were soon ordered to stand as Judge Abernathy returned to the courtroom. When they were seated again, the judge asked opposing counsel to come to the bench. I assume your clients have not changed their position on the financial settlement? The two lawyers exchanged glances. No, Your Honor. Very good. Before I make my decision, I would like to ask Mrs. Weatherby a few questions. Hannah Montrose looked scared, but then smiled and motioned for Melanie to come forward. Everything will be fine, she whispered to her client. Don't forget to address him as Your Honor. Adam's lawyer took his seat and leaned towards him. It's usually not a good sign when the judge wants to hear more from the other side. Adam watched sourly as his soon-to-be ex-wife testified. The suit she wore was conservatively cut, but fitted enough to show off her figure. He noticed the judge was watching Melanie and shook his head. I think we're finished, he whispered to his lawyer. The judge scanned the papers in front of him and then turned to face the woman sitting in the witness box. So, Mrs. Weatherby, it appears that the only issue separating the two of you is the amount of alimony that should be awarded. Your offer involves an amount significantly higher than that which your husband offered. That's right, Your Honor. And how do you justify the amount you proposed? We are asking for a higher amount in recognition of my years of marriage, and the fact that I will have to start my life essentially from scratch, Your Honor. It's clear. However, Mr. Weatherby claims his only source of income is the company he founded, which is still operating at a loss. Why do you think Mr. Weatherby can afford the financial support you offer? Your Honor, we argue that Adam is deliberately reducing his true income by siphoning funds into his business. He could easily pay the child support I'm asking for by simply modestly adjusting his current investment level. The audited financial statement shows negative cash flow. Your Honor, Adam's accountants can manipulate the numbers to show any result they want. The judge raised his eyebrows. Are you saying that the financial statements are fraudulent? Lawyer Melanie turned pale and shook her head decisively. Melanie noticed this and quickly caught herself thinking. No, Your Honor, not at all. Simply, earnings can be deferred and investments accelerated, all within the bounds of generally accepted accounting principles. He invests too much in his company, that's all. Adam felt his blood pressure rise. He leaned over and whispered angrily, what a bitch. She knows it's not true. She's just trying to pressure me to get what she wants, no matter the consequences. Meanwhile, Judge Abernathy reviewed the case summary in front of him. Until now, we have focused on your husband's investment in his business, Mrs. Weatherby. From what I can see here, Mr. Weatherby has also invested heavily in you, or at least in your education. If you mean my MBA, Your Honor, then it's true that Adam paid for my tuition, but I was the only one who worked. Did the hard work for all the courses, took all the tests, and wrote the dissertation. I've worked day and night for the past 2 years, including last summer. And you just graduated from university, is that right? Yes, sir. I graduated with honors, she said proudly. He nodded. Very good, Mrs. Weatherby, that's all. You can sit down. When Melanie stood next to her lawyer again, Judge Abernathy raised his glasses and looked at both sides for a moment. Having heard all the evidence, I intend to award Mrs. Weatherby the full amount of financial support she requested. Adam winced, and Melanie leaned over and hugged her lawyer, but the judge wasn't done yet. This financial settlement equates to a monthly amount that will allow Mrs. Weatherby to live quite comfortably without working for the foreseeable future. However, she has just completed a college degree that should prepare her for a high-paying business position. To give her additional motivation to use her expensive education, I am awarding Mrs. Weatherby alimony for 6 months only. 6 months? You can't do that, Melanie cried. I can, and I did it, answered the judge. Then he hit the wooden block with a hammer. Next thing. Her lawyer quickly pulled Melanie away from the bench, even as she continued to try to appeal the decision. Only the appearance of a large bailiff convinced the unfortunate young woman to stop her actions. Do I only have to pay child support for 6 months? I can live with that, Adam told his lawyer as they stood up and began to walk out of the courtroom. How about this? Adam's lawyer answered happily. I thought we lost when the judge picked her number, but I guess he wasn't too impressed with the way she tried to milk you dry. However, not many husbands behave so well in divorce court. I wonder what made him take you so easy. You don't think the fact that she pleaded no contest to the charge of adultery was a factor? He should not have taken this into account when determining the financial settlement. Adam looked back again to see Melanie still arguing with her lawyer and chuckled. Well, whatever it is, I'm happy with how it turned out. At that moment, a hand touched his shoulder, and Adam turned to see an elderly man whom he had never met before, but who seemed vaguely familiar to him. I wanted to introduce myself, explained the gray-haired man. I'm Professor Mayfair. Adam grabbed his hand and shook it firmly. Professor, it is an unexpected pleasure for me to meet you in person, sir. Thank you again for your help. What brought you to court today? The elderly man smiled. After our conversation, I became interested in your case, so I decided to drop by to see how everything turned out. Then, his smile grew wider. It also gave me the opportunity to say a few words to an old friend of mine, Judge Abernathy. He shook Adam's hand again. I'm glad everything turned out well for you. If I'm ever able to help again, I'll be happy to do so. He winked. We divorced husbands must stick together. When the professor left, Adam looked after him. Interesting, he muttered, then shook his head. As he did so, out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw Gary in the crowd of spectators. But when he turned to look, she was not there. It took a hell of a long time before... She pressed a familiar number on her mobile phone, and when the call was answered, she hesitantly said, Hello, Jerry. It's me, Melanie. Melanie, what a surprise. I haven't heard from you since you moved to Florida. How are you doing? To be honest, it's been a pretty tough few years. Actually, that's why I called. I really needed to talk to a friendly interlocutor. Certainly. Tell me how you're doing. Are you working on it now? Actually, that's part of the problem. I thought that with my MBA, I would have no problem finding a good job. But it turns out that employers here are more interested in experience than an academic degree. Most of the jobs I was offered were internships. Oh my God, that doesn't sound very profitable, so where did you end up? When the alimony stopped, I was completely desperate. I even got a job as an administrative assistant for a while, but it was terrible. So now I have started a new career in financial advice. Actually, that's one of the reasons I called. I can analyze your financial situation if you don't mind. You'd be surprised how many people neglect these things. There was a pause for a moment. Oh, Melanie, I'd love to help you, but my finances are in good shape right now and I'm pretty confident about the future. I really don't think I need help. Sorry. It's okay, Jerry. I hear this often, but I decided to try it. It's so hard to get a foothold in this business. In fact, I had to move in with my mother to reduce expenses. Do you live with your mother? What happened to you and Carl? Don't even mention that bastard's name. We broke up just a few months after we arrived here. Did you break up? What's happened? Oh, Jerry, that was terrible. Carl dropped out of school without earning his MBA. I don't know exactly what happened, but his advisor rejected his master's thesis and told Carl that he would have to start over. Carl felt very bitter and decided not to return. He refused to look for a job and hung around our apartment all day long, playing video games and drinking. After a while, he began to take out his resentment on me. It got to the point that at some point, I had to call the police on him. Oh, Melanie, how terrible for you. I think you're lucky to get rid of him. And look at it this way. Now you can freely go out and meet new people. Have fun and go dancing whenever you want. I remember how much you missed all this when you were married. Melanie sighed. Nightclubs and parties require money, Gary, and I don't have a lot of spare cash right now. And to tell you the truth, when I go out, it's not as glamorous or exciting as I used to think. In fact, I remember one friend warning me that there were a lot more creeps out there than good guys. She paused, but when Gary didn't say anything, Melanie decided to change the subject. What about you, Jerry? How are you doing? Are you dating anyone special right now? Actually, my situation has changed quite dramatically, Mel. In fact, I'm getting married next month. Married? It's amazing. Who is this lucky guy? I know him. Yes, actually, you know. This is Adam, Melanie. Adam and I are engaged. My Adam. Are you engaged to my Adam? You can't do this. I'm afraid I already did. We'll have a small civil ceremony in the backyard of our new home, and then we'll fly to Paris for our honeymoon. New house? Honeymoon in Paris? Adam can't afford all this. Not only my situation has changed dramatically, but also Adam's situation. The same month you moved to Florida, he received that big order he had been working on for so long. After that, his business really took off. Clearly, his new product is just what the auto industry needs, and that is not all. Earlier this year, Adam received an offer from a large manufacturer to buy his business for a fortune. He agreed, and the deal will be completed next week. So, as you can see, you don't have to worry about our financial future. Melanie could only stutter, but Gary persisted, and now her tone had changed. You know, all this could have been yours, Melanie, but you weren't content with what you had. I warned you from the very beginning that you were risking everything by starting your little affair. Besides, I warned you that there would be women who would happily pick up the pieces if your marriage fell apart. But you were the one who encouraged me. It was you who came up with how I could. Suddenly, Melanie's voice rose in shock. Oh my God, Jerry, it was you. You planned everything from the very beginning. All I did was tell you about a harmless little fantasy. You manipulated me into acting in accordance with it. You tricked me into believing I could get away with having an affair. Actually, Melanie, you're exaggerating. I didn't force you to do anything you didn't want. All I did was give you enough rope to hang yourself. I cannot believe this. I bet you were the one who warned Adam about Carl. You're smarter, Melanie. Think about it. If I told Adam, he'd wonder how I knew. That wouldn't be very smart of me, would it? On the other hand, I told you not to delete your secret Gmail account and told Adam to check his email. I use Gmail all the time, so I was sure he would see what he saw. So no, Melanie, I didn't tell Adam about your lover. All I did was arrange the dominoes so they would fall where I wanted them to fall. I cannot believe this. I trusted you, Gary. I thought you were my friend. Gary laughed. You know what they say. All's fair in love and war. You won't get away with this. I'll make sure Adam knows what you did, what a schemer you really are. He will definitely call off the wedding as soon as he finds out the truth. I'm very sorry, Melanie, but I'm afraid I'll have to interrupt our little conversation. Adam and I have plans for the evening, and I want to look extra good for him. Oh, and don't bother calling back. I'll block your number as soon as I hang up. You are an insidious, vile bitch. Jerry greeted her future husband with a kiss when he came home from work. Adam kissed her back and then pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. "You won't believe who sent me a letter today, Melanie." "Oh, really?" Jerry said casually. "I almost forgot about her." "What does she need?" Adam looked at his bride impassively. "Actually, she wrote to warn me about you. She says you planned everything that happened just to separate Mel and me. It's pretty wild." "Can I see?" asked Jerry. He handed her the printout. She glanced at it quickly, then handed it back to him with a smile. Poor Melanie. She could make her little jealous fantasy halfway believable if she added one more thing. He looked at her curiously. She winked at him. She should have signed it "Good Friend." It took him a few minutes to stop laughing. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.